Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Through the Keyhole. I'm your host, Karyn Dolan, coming to you live from Rochester, New York. Thanks for joining me today on Paranormal Radio Network. You can also hear us now on UPRN 105.3 FM in New Orleans, or on your cell phone by typing PARA, then 27627. For more information on the show and on my guests, visit our website at keyholepublishing.com. As always, I want to hear from you. If you're listening live tonight, join us on the message board to discuss the program and add your questions and comments. Go to paranormalradionetwork.org to join us in the virtual auditorium. You can participate in the conversation there through instant messaging. You can also email me with your questions and comments. My email address is kdolan@rochester.rr.com, or you can call into the show toll-free at 1-877-786-0562. And if you go to the website at keyholepublishing.com, all of this contact information is right there. So you'll have the phone number and everything right in front of you. Once again, this month, I am joined by UFO researchers and authors Peter Robbins and Richard Dolan. If any of you don't know, Peter has been working in the field for more than 25 years and is well known for his book Left at East Gate, which explores the UFO sighting in Rendlesham Forest. Rich Dolan, aside from being my handsome and charming husband, is the author of UFOs and the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2. That's right, Volume 2 is due to come out within a few months, and we're all very excited about that. The three of us have gotten together several times for these conversations. They've always been a pleasure for us, and I've always gotten excellent feedback from listeners, so I'm hoping you all enjoy this as much as we do. Tonight, for the first time, I'm trying something new. I have invited a couple of additional guests to join us. And I've heard a lot of talk lately about the issue of young people in ufology and the need to bring more young people into the field. There's been a lot of excellent work done over the past 60 years or so in the field of ufology. But a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen when some of the older members of the field decide they've had enough. They just don't want to do this anymore. Well, we did not set out to do this deliberately, but Rich and I appear to be contributing to the future of ufological research. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to our son, Michael, and our daughter, Elaine. They've grown up in a house where UFOs are considered, if not normal, at least a fact of life. And I would like to hand over the phones to them and to Peter for a little while this evening so that the three of them can talk. Peter, are you with me?
I am indeed.
Okay. Well, what do you think about talking to my kids for a little bit?
I'm terrified, but I'll do it anyway.
You know what? I think I would be too.
Actually, in truth, I've really been looking forward to it. I think you know that I have a background in education. I have taught literally every grade from first grade through postgraduate, and also have had the privilege of putting together UFO presentations for young people. So I've only met Elaine and Mike in photographs, and I've read some of Elaine's wonderful writing. And I know you two pretty well, so it's a pleasure to meet you two, Mike and Elaine.
Oh, great. Let me get the technical aspect of this hooked up. I know at least Elaine is able to hear you. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
We're on the line. Thanks.
Hello, Mr. Robbins.
Please call me Peter.
Okay. Hey, Peter.
Hi. How are you, Elaine?
Good.
Good. Good.
Hello. Hello, Mr. Robbins.
Also, hi, Mike, and please call me Peter. My father's Mr. Robbins.
Oh, hello, Peter.
Okay. I've been looking forward to this show a lot, and as I think your mom told you, I wanted you guys to know that you're absolutely welcome to ask me any question that you want, not just questions that you think are the ones I want to hear or the polite questions, absolutely anything.
I don't have enough foreknowledge to know which questions you want to hear. I'm really doing this with absolutely no preparation whatsoever.
Well, that's going to work out fine. We'll figure it out as we go.
Sort of the same for me.
That's great. So then, now what?
Yep.
Who shall speak?
Well, let me kind kind of started rolling by saying, in your case, I know where, your awareness about UFOs and any interest that you have may come from, and that's from your mom and dad. Do you have any questions for me about where my interest started?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Well, I know that you wrote a book on the Rendlesham UFO landing, and that was in 1980, so...
Yeah, although the book, the event, you're absolutely right, occurred in England in 1980. I got started on it with one of the witnesses who was in the United States Air Force at the time and saw, I guess, the most dramatic part of it. And when he left the Air Force, he felt that he should talk about what he knew, and that's how the case went public. We met 7 years later in 1987 and worked on the book for almost 10 years, and it came out in 1997. About the time you came out.
About that time, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was a very interesting project and a fascinating story that just had so many angles to it and so many people involved. Sometimes, as you know, you get caught up in a project, whether it's, a school report or a poem or something, and it can take a lot longer than you think it's going to take, and you take pride in the work that you've done.
Yep, I've got that.
Yeah. So are you two actually interested in UFOs, or you pretty much humor your parents by sort of, tolerating their interest in it?
Well, I'm into UFOs, but I think I'm actually into the Bermuda Triangle a little bit, too. I think that's really cool.
Well,
But I am into UFOs.
Yeah, I think it's very common that when you have an interest in one part of, let's just say, unusual topics, it often is the case that you'll get interested in other things that are just fascinating and, may not be directly related. Before I became really interested in UFOs, interested enough to write about it and learn what I could and become a speaker on the subject, I was fascinated by ancient cultures and the Egyptian pyramids and, claims that people had flown before the Wright brothers and is there life after death? Is there reincarnation? When your mind is open, your mind is open. And I think for a lot of people, they fear what they don't understand. I don't fear what I don't understand. I try to respect what I don't understand, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And, Mike, any special interest that you have in other areas of the unusual or the non-standard?
I don't know. My thought process has deserted me.
Fair enough.
Yep, he's a riot.
Well, let's make believe we're just hanging out like we are. For what it's worth, I had a very powerful UFO sighting with one of my sisters when we were not that different in age than you two are. I was 14 and my sister was 12. We were a little older than you two. But we had very different reactions. My sister was very open to it and fascinated by it and just sort of filled with wonder. And she never forgot it and always felt it was a very special thing. I actually was a pretty straight little kid who, in so many words, kind of believed what a good part of the grown-up world put forward, that, this is nonsense. Basically, it's fine in science fiction and, old black and white movies with bad special effects, but it doesn't really happen. Nobody ever said that to me. It was just kind of, a message that was communicated in so many words to me as a kid. And when we saw them, it really quite upset me, because if it was true, it meant that maybe, other things were true that I thought weren't, and it was quite overwhelming. Most important, though, I really knew in my heart that if I talked about this to my friends in junior high school, they might think I was kind of a whack job or, trying to get special attention or seem different or something. And I didn't. I wanted to fit in. And so I didn't talk about it. And over the next weeks and months, I put it out of my mind until it really was out of my mind. And it was not until quite a number of years later that I remembered it and talked to my sister about it, and she had never forgotten it. And that's when I really got interested.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it sure was to us. And when I asked her how come, we had never talked about this, because actually 14 or 15 years passed. And she reminded me that afternoon she had brought it up and asked me if I wanted to talk about it, and I made it very clear that I didn't. And what she said was, you're my older brother, I love you and I respect you, and I wasn't going to push it. And one day led to the next week, led to the next month, and then the years started to pass, and, it took this long for us to talk about it. And sometimes that's the way it is in life. That's the only experience I've ever had like that, but I'll sure never forget it, and I've sure remained interested in the subject ever since.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. I know I'm pretty deep into UFOs, and especially the Bermuda Triangle. I just don't get that thing.
Well,
I really don't.
I think sometimes there are certain things in life we'll never understand. We can try. I actually flew over the Bermuda Triangle when I was 16, and nothing happened, but boy, oh boy, was my imagination going crazy that something might happen. I've read all kinds of explanations or theories, and you know what? I have no idea. I don't know. It's a genuine mystery. But we know it exerts a real effect on boats and planes sometimes. It can make people be completely disoriented, and, you certainly have some knowledge of it, and I'm sure are aware of cases where boats and planes have gone mysteriously missing when they should have had no problem getting to where they were going. I don't know. Is it aliens? Is it some kind of weird magnetic thing? Is it some hole in another dimension? I don't even know what I'm talking about in a way, because it is unknowable unless, some scientists or explorers can come forward and say, we have figured it out and this is what it is.
No,
but otherwise, we have a genuine mystery.
Yep. Like, the exact same when I tell my friends crazy stuff like this. They just look at me like I killed 200 babies. Like, what?
Well, that's kind of a gruesome comparison.
Some things don't really change, especially when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be excluded. Nobody wants to be pointed out as weird or strange, even if we are a little. Everybody likes to think that, they can socialize with other people and not be made embarrassed for something that they take seriously that somebody else may not. For what it's worth, and it extends into the grown-up world, even worse in a way, where people are often very more concerned about what people think about them than maybe what they think about themselves. And as long as you know that you are genuinely interested in something, there's no reason not to try to learn more about it. I guess sometimes maybe it's a good thing not to advertise it if you feel it's going to exclude you from, maybe it'll make a friend feel weird, or maybe the friend really is just anxious. A lot of people are, again, and it's the way it is in a lot of grown-ups I've met, they are simply afraid of what they don't understand, so they make fun of it. We do it as kids too. But if you have real imagination and a certain amount of courage and you know that this is interesting to you and there's something to it, it is kind of sad when, you back off just because you think, if I do that, it'll make people like me more or not think I'm weird. I've read one of your poems, Elaine, and it's a wonderful poem. You obviously are a good writer and you have a great imagination, but you don't have to have an imagination to know that strange things happen and that what can be somebody else's fiction is in fact real. One of the things I wanted to talk to your mom and dad about later, and I guess we will, is right now, over the last months, the British government has been putting up documents on their official military website about UFOs. And these are documents that for up to 50 years have been kept secret. Why? Well, because governments like to keep secrets. But now they're starting to make them public, which is a very healthy thing. And just a few days ago, they put up a document about a 1957 UFO event where they saw basically a huge UFO, and an aircraft was ordered to go up and fire rockets at it. And it got very close, and in fact 24 rockets, and firing on an unknown object. Who knows what could have happened there. And as it got close, the thing took off, and in a second was gone, like a science fiction movie or something. Except it really happened. And one of the lessons is, here's the British government saying this was real, and we are now willing to admit it. And 13 years ago, the story leaked out, and it was published in a newspaper. But most people thought it was silly because it was a tabloid newspaper. It was more like the New York Post than the New York Times, so most people just ignored it. But I think that's an important lesson about human behavior. People will ignore or make fun of things that make them nervous or, feel awkward. So, yeah, and I know you didn't kill 200 babies, and, follow your heart and follow, what really interests you. Don't worry about what other people think, ideally. It's easy for me to say, but that's what I've tried to do.
I'm a Dolan. I don't really care what people think of me.
Yeah, we all hate your father. I don't know if he knows that. It's actually a little embarrassing. But, we smile and nod when he's around, and, he thinks we like him, so it all works out.
Geez, I hope that hatred doesn't extend to me.
No, because we're crazy about your mom, and,
Right, so it kind of balances out.
Yeah, no, I adore your parents. They're good friends, and they are both very, very unique in their ways, as I guess I don't have to tell you. And the contributions they're making to this study, I think, are very important ones. And as a fellow kind of seeker of the truth, there are easier ways to live your life. It's, easy to just have a job and go to work and get paid rather than write papers and try to get people to hire you to give them. But I think it's a much more exciting way to live your life. And I know that you two had the fun last year of attending the McMinnville UFO Festival in Oregon.
That was fun.
Yes, it was. I was going to ask you what you thought of it, because there's a serious side and kind of just a fun side, but it's a great event.
Well, I thought that mainly the fun side was riding on the float. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the serious side,
like hearing your dad speak?
Oh, yeah. I sort of slept through it.
Okay. It wasn't nearly as much fun as riding on the float, I know that.
Yeah.
But the reason I ask is because it's one of my favorite UFO-related events, and I think that they've really been very successful in doing two things, which is having a serious side and having good speakers, people who are respected for their work, like your dad and many other folks, and I've been honored to speak there twice over the years, and then to basically kind of celebrate how deeply the idea, at least, of UFOs and aliens and ETs and things, how much it's a part of popular culture. Even your friends that maybe think it's silly or not true, you know that they've seen all the movies and, you know, it's fun to think about. But I think that event itself is able to celebrate it in a way without making fun of it. At least that's what I felt. There was nobody there, you know, being mean-spirited or nasty. It was just fun, the parade and the associated lighthearted events. But I'm glad you two had a chance to go to that.
Yeah, it was a great conference.
Mm-hmm. Everybody was dressed up as, like, aliens and stuff. It was
Yes.
so cool.
Not to mention the alien pets.
And also, if I can say, it was Michael's birthday when we went down there.
Oh, how cool. Very great place to celebrate your birthday.
Yeah.
And I just had a great deal of respect to see dogs wrapped in aluminum foil being very patient with their owners, and you know, got some great photographs, of course. But it is, you know, it is both things. It is very serious, and at the same time, gosh, we'd be losing about 1/10 of our movies without evil aliens and extraterrestrials and, you know, beings from other dimensions and things. It's certainly the stuff that fires up our imaginations, but people like me and your folks who have studied this stuff maintain that it is based on something very real. And whether or not we'll fully understand it in our lifetimes, who knows? But it is worth taking seriously and trying to learn more about.
Yeah. I mean, I know I want to learn more about UFOs and stuff. I mean, I just think that they're just like us in another dimension, really.
Yeah, that may well be it. When I first started to think about it, I thought it was, you know, they were from another planet, or maybe they lived on the dark side of the moon, or maybe they were, you know, at the far end of our universe. And then, you know, once you start to think about it, it's like, well, maybe, but maybe they're from another dimension. Maybe they're us 1,000,000 years in the future, come back. Maybe they've traveled through time, or maybe they're here with us all the time, but just like, you know, one dimension away and we can't see them. Maybe they share this earth with us rather than, you know, our idea that they come from a far distance and come and go. Or maybe they're all true. We are, of course, talking about the unknown and whether or not, you know, you're in school at any level, or you're, you know, a PhD doctorate in philosophy, or some big deal educator, or somebody who's super smart and old. I don't know if your opinion is any more worthy of respect than somebody who doesn't have, you know, all your experience or credentials, because we are talking about the unknown, and just the fact that, Elaine, that you just said maybe they're from another dimension, than another planet, that makes me think, this is a girl who is thinking, you know, and right, we're only limited by our imaginations here, and sometimes that's the way we get to the truth, especially when it's so confounding and truly strange.
I just think that they're, like, they think that we're the aliens and they're from a totally different dimension, and they just want to learn more about us. And in a way, we want to learn more about them, too. So
I think that's very perceptive, because let's face it, to them, we are the aliens. We're the different ones. Yeah, exactly. Very good observation.
Brave spacefarers exploring this alien world.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at what, we like to think we're the biggest deal because we're human beings and we can do all this stuff and, animals are below us. Well, look at what we've done to this wonderful little planet we live on. We're
destroying it.
Terrible. No animal has ever hurt this planet, and we do it all the time. We human beings, or we a certain segment of human beings. I'd like to think that, there are those of us that try to live our lives without creating any more damage than, one does in the course of living a fairly modern life, but that you respect the planet, and maybe that's another reason that they are here, because they may have a relationship with Earth that we can only imagine, that may go back even before we were here. Maybe we are to them what laboratory animals are to us, and that's another thing that disturbs, I know, a lot of adults, that just that theory that we may be somebody's experiment, that, maybe it is like religious people say, and maybe we got here the way that they talk about in the New Testament or the Old Testament or the Quran or the Upanishads or, the teachings of Buddha or what have you. Or maybe we were evolving and these beings landed and said, let's give these interesting creatures something we'll call a thumb. Let's give them a bigger brain. Let's give them a sense of morality and see what they do with it. And we haven't been doing so well. So, again, we are only limited by our imagination here on what the truth really is. But, are we related to them in some way? That would be very upsetting to a lot of people as well. We like to, the grown-up world is very attached to the idea that, we've evolved in a certain way and we are the supreme creature in the universe. And, we could be doing better here on Earth, and if UFOs are representative of some UFOs anyway, of very advanced technology from parts unknown, who's driving them? Where do they make them? Why are they coming here? After all the years that I've been doing this work, I can ask better questions than most people, but unlike a number of my colleagues who feel they have the answers, I still feel I'm a student of this, and I'm just doing my best to figure it out along with everyone else.
Peter, this is Karyn. I'm just sharing the phone with Elaine for a second here.
Yep.
I don't think you're on the chat room, the message board, so I just wanted to pass on. Someone did ask a question
for the
kids. They want to know how accepting or open are Mike and Elaine's friends to the UFO subject, or do they ever talk about it with their friends? And I could answer this, but I think it would be more fun if they do.
Yeah, that is a terrific question, because we all have all different kinds of friends, and let me kind of pose it to both of you. Do you have friends who think it's really cool that your parents do this stuff and are interested in this subject, as well as friends that get a little
Peter
around it?
You have no idea.
Almost all of my friends think it's really cool that my mom has her own radio show.
Yes.
My dad writes his book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that this family is like a UFO freakazoid world, basically.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that freakazoid coming from you is a rude term.
Well, for what it's worth in the outside world, we'll laughingly call the outside world, that I live in, the work that your mom and dad do is respected and it's admired. And, I know people that go to UFO conferences in part to hear them talk because they're fascinated by their research. And a good researcher that's able to communicate their ideas is the equivalent of a good teacher. So I'm not surprised, that you do have friends that take it seriously, as well as, kind of wish their parents were cooler in terms of, what your folks are doing. And other friends, again, who maybe they are interested, but maybe their concern is if other kids know that they're interested, that they'll make fun of them. So why don't I just make fun of you, but secretly kind of wish that I had the courage to say, I think, you guys have an amazing family, and I am interested in this subject, because maybe I once saw something in the sky I couldn't explain. Which brings me to another question, and Karyn, if there are any more messages or questions that come up for any of us, just please jump in and let us know. But have either of you ever seen anything in the sky that you couldn't explain, or that, didn't fit into the normal patterns?
Well, one night, Michael was over at his friend's house, and we were walking our dog. Mom and Dad and I were just out walking at the night. And the strange thing is, just before he saw something really weird, Dad said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO tonight?" And then he looked straight up, and there it was. We saw a figure just moving really, really pretty fast. I sort of thought that it was changing colors, like from red to blue, but I'm still not quite sure about that.
Sure.
But it went into the clouds and never came back. So...
Just traveling in a straight line the whole time, or did it stop or change?
No, it didn't really stop, and the clouds were very thin.
Yeah.
It just went into them and never came out. And we stared for like 10 minutes.
Wow.
And it never came out.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, even the greatest expert can't exactly say what it was, although I think we can say what it wasn't. If it was flashing different colors, it probably was not a shooting star or a meteorite or a comet. Was it going sort of flying in a downward direction or an upward direction, or kind of...
Not really. It was just...
Flying
into the clouds and never came out. So we still don't know about that. And I think Michael has a couple.
Of course I do.
What have you seen, Michael?
Well, my mom and I were, out having lunch, and we were looking out the restaurant window, and then we saw a dark spot in the clouds, or in the sky going toward a patch of clouds. Nice, thin clouds. And it just went in, and we watched for a couple minutes, and it just didn't come out. A fascinating encounter.
Yeah. I know when I had my sighting with my sister, we saw 5. I mean, this was as good as it gets, basically. We saw 5 silvery-looking disc-shaped objects in a V kind of formation on an absolutely cloudless late morning or early afternoon where we grew up on Long Island. And I do remember looking up at them and having what something happened that I would now call a checklist reaction. That's just my own term for it, and it went something like this. I look up, and there they are, and my mind goes, those are not planes or helicopters or balloons or blimps or kites or clouds. They're not birds. They're not reflections from the ground.
They're certainly not Superman.
Not Superman. I went through everything I could think of in, my mind's eye, and nothing fit. And then, I just looked at them, and I thought, my last kind of thought of holding on to something conventional was, well, maybe there's some kind of secret government plane, that they're testing but they didn't have any wings, and they didn't have any tails, and they were round. So that's a very special government plane. And then it hit me that what I was looking at were truly mysterious, and they were not anything I had ever seen or even really imagined. The closest thing I had ever seen to them was in, kind of hokey science fiction movies that were in black and white at the time, and, by today's standards, pretty basic, but they were fun to watch and everything, and think about, aliens invading Earth and things, but
yeah, and
quite upsetting to me. It was really upsetting because it was everything I had thought was real, now was open to question. Where my sister, who again was a few years younger and let's say more just at that edge of real childhood, it just made her imagination go wild, and it was exciting and fascinating and mysterious, and she wasn't as worried as I was about what other kids would think, although she didn't talk about it really either. She was smart like that, but again, she was fascinated and curious and very excited. I was rather anxious and wished it hadn't happened for a long time.
Yeah, like when I had my sighting with Mom and Dad, I got really, really nervous. Like, I was really scared. I didn't know, if it was going to come down and abduct us, or if it was just going to go flying back. But,
I guess
we didn't really know. It went behind the clouds, so we didn't really know what it did.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a very important point, Elaine, which is when you take things down to their basics, all fears, no matter what you're fearful about, in a way, you're fearful of something that's unknown. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to have a happy life? Is, this trip going to go okay? Is the car going to have a flat tire? Am I going to eat something at a restaurant that's going to make me sick? These are all small little things. But when you look at something truly unknown, it is, oh my God, is it going to come and take us away, or is it dangerous? Or
I know. I really didn't know what to expect. That was I think the first UFO sighting I've ever had, and I honestly, truly did not know what was going to happen, so I got pretty freaked out.
Well, that's the most natural thing in the world. And, it's up there with what happens to us after we die. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I know a lot of people that think they know or believe that they know, and I guess that's sort of like a number one kind of fear of the unknown, but I would be willing to put UFOs and their implications, if you will, what they may or may not represent, right up there in terms of fear of the unknown. And as a friend and a colleague of mine and your mom and dad's, somebody I'm sure you've seen on documentaries or, maybe even as I know he's lectured with your dad and I at different times, a nuclear physicist named Stanton Friedman, one of the real pioneers in this work. And Stan said something years ago that I've never forgotten, which is, the question is not, are UFOs representative of advanced technologies being piloted by beings who are far ahead of us in different ways? The question is, has one ever been? And after the kind of study that I've done, and I think your dad and mom would agree, the answer to that question is an overwhelming yes. I'd be willing to even bet that most, if not the majority, of modern UFO sightings are not, space machines piloted by interdimensional creatures or what have you, that they are, one way or the other, something not so crazy or wild. but more and more in modern times where there are aircraft that are built without our knowledge, with our money, that can do extraordinary things, so-called black projects. They call them that because, how all the secrecy around them kind of blacks them out to us, the people. But there may be things flying around that human beings have built that the American government, to a degree, is responsible for, that seems so futuristic that they might as well be, a flying saucer from Mars or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I absolutely, you've said it there for all of us. It's a fear of the unknown. And that in itself is a reason to try to understand more of what is really going on here. And one of the reasons that I admire your mom and dad so much, because they are making important contributions in this field. And I think there'll be a time in the future when people will look back on people like your mom and dad and say, in those old days when people used to make fun of UFOs and thought they were nonsense and anybody who saw them was crazy, there were people, not many of them, but they were courageous and they were smart and they kept studying this. And now, of course, we read their books in school and we all know who they were, but there was a time when people used to make fun of them, and I think there will come a time in the future when people like your folks are acknowledged for the important work that they're doing now. And pretty much everybody in the world will know that UFOs are real and, what they're about. It'll be interesting to see if we ever do come to that in our lifetime. We may well. Who knows? It's a mystery.
Yep.
Gotta love mysteries.
So do you guys have any other questions for me right now? Anything? My shoe size?
Well, maybe not that. I can't really think of anything.
Doke.
Not really.
My dad mentioned that you and he investigated the supposed suicide of James Forrestal.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that, please? Or?
Sure. It's a subject that captured my imagination in the course of a day about 20 years ago. In fact, it also involves this other investigative writer I mentioned, Stanton Friedman. 20 years ago, 1987, more than 20 years ago, I first heard him talk about this mysterious group that President Truman put together after the Roswell, New Mexico crash in 1947, which I'm convinced is a real story. I mean, it's a real thing that happened, and that the President of the United States reacted responsibly by other experts in various areas to look into this. And I think if Truman had had his way, he would have gone public with it, but ultimately decided not to, or was convinced not to. And he surrounded himself with 12 of the greatest minds in defense, science, human behavior, history, and one can only imagine what went on at these meetings. And one of the people was a man named James Forrestal, who not only was our very first Secretary of Defense, he was the man that President Truman, after World War II, said, I want you to basically dismantle, take apart the old, what they then called the Department of War, which had been the name of it since the American Revolution, basically, and create something new that we're going to call the Department of Defense. In a way, maybe Department of War is a more honest name than Department of Defense, but that's not the real issue here. James Forrestal was a courageous, smart, patriotic man
who was a real asset to this country during World War II and in the days following. And I became quite obsessed and spent months initially investigating the last months of his life, in great detail, in fact, and sort of exciting in that sense to be an investigative writer. And I'm sure your dad can confirm the feeling that, you know, sometimes you're working away in a library or an archive or with some old books, and you're the one to put some pieces together just because you're looking and looking and looking, and to maybe be the first one to draw a new conclusion about something based on real evidence. As a writer and a public speaker, I have to tell you, Mike, I'm fascinated by language and the derivation of words. And I remember at one point looking into this, a very simple thing hit me that I just really liked, which was just the word research. It's a word I had said to myself, you know, in one way or another, or heard since I was a kid, but what did it mean? And it's right there in front of you. It means to research, literally to look again. Isn't that great?
Very.
And what I was able to put together about James Forrestal, and in fact I'll be happy to email you a paper, or I'll find one of the papers that I wrote, if you'd like, and send it to you, was that the day that he stepped down from being the first Secretary of Defense and the second one came in, he had a profound nervous breakdown. Well, why did that happen? Well, it's often a number of things that cause us to, you know, have a big change in life like that. But I began to put together information that made me convinced that one of the reasons was from the time he took office in September of 1947, which was only 2 months after Roswell and the sightings a few weeks before that in Washington State, he would have been the number one man next to the President of the United States to really know what was going on, that these machines were coming and going, that we didn't have anything that could touch them, that they weren't the Russians, that they weren't made by anybody on Earth. And, you know, you're supposed to keep a straight face and look tough. And at the same time, I'm sure he was increasingly concerned, and nothing that he could do as the head of the most powerful defense organization in the whole planet at the time, because America was indeed the most powerful country in the world right after World War II. Some might argue we still are, maybe militarily, maybe not. I have my doubts. But it broke him in part. I think he was terribly depressed and felt that he had let down, you know, the people of the United States by not being able to figure this out. And at the time, you know, right now, I'll bet everybody knows somebody that it has seen a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It's not uncommon. I saw a psychologist when I was younger and got real value from it. I just about everybody that I know at some point, or somebody in their family, you know, has seeked out a professional counselor, and kids too. I mean, you probably know kids that, you know, go to see some kind of therapist every once in a while. It's perfectly natural. But 60 years ago, it was not. As they used to say, if you're going to see a psychiatrist, you must be crazy. And I think a lot of the very powerful men around President Truman were very concerned that because he had had a nervous breakdown, that he might talk about what he knew. And this was absolutely top secret. And ultimately, I think they decided, and he didn't, by the way, he went into an institution, and there they treated him for depression, and he responded to the treatment, and he was getting better, and he was very close to being released from the institution. And I'm sorry to say, I think certain people very high up in the American government, and this is my opinion, I can't absolutely prove it, but I think I can come as close as anybody can, that they felt if he was let out of the institution and then maybe got sick again, that he might blab about this, and then everybody in the world would know, and, you know, maybe people would go crazy all over the world or something. So they had to kill him, and I think that's just what they did. They might have even liked and respected him, as they, you know, might have said, it's nothing personal. It's just the way it has to be. I mean, that's sort of the briefest kind of story about James Forrestal, but if I'm right, then that would make him, and your dad as well, an early casualty of this secret-keeping. Keeping secrets can be very necessary, and I'm not saying that, you know, if we do know all about this, we, the government, not we individuals, that it is the smartest thing in the world to just tell everything to everybody all at once. But it's not very healthy to keep lots and lots of secrets either. And I think we all know that feeling personally when you're sort of carrying around a secret that you'd really like to talk about, but for any number of reasons you're not comfortable talking about. Have you ever had that feeling, either of you?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of.
Are we about to get some interesting dirt on you, Elaine?
This is your mother. I had to take the phone away. I'm so sorry. I actually had to cut in because it's time to go to break.
Okay.
We have blown through an entire hour. This has been so much fun.
I've really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I hope at some point we actually get to meet and continue this in person.
That would be great.
I got to cut in at just the right opportune moment to stop anything really bad from coming out. That's great.
Darn it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll discuss that in private, Elaine and Mike.
Yeah. Mike and Elaine, thanks so much for joining us. That was really, really fun having you guys on.
You're welcome, Mom.
No problem, Mom.
Okay. Mike, hand the phone over to your father. And for everyone who's listening, thanks so much for joining us for Through the Keyhole. That was the first hour. We're going to go and take a bit of a break, so don't go too far. We will be back, and I'll be talking with Rich Dolan and Peter Robbins. And we have quite a bit of news, actually, from the last couple of months to catch up on. So don't go away. Hi, everyone. We're back, and you're listening to Through the Keyhole on the Paranormal Radio Network and also on UPRN 105.3 FM in New Orleans. I'm your host, Karyn Dolan, and tonight is my regular news roundup type of show, I guess, with Peter Robbins and Rich Dolan. If you missed the first hour, we had a couple of special guests on, so be sure to check out the archives for that. So, Peter, welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be back.
And Rich, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I enjoy this show, Karyn.
Good.
I have a good time here.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Seeing that we live together makes things especially convenient. That
I guess.
It's a good experience for us.
Yeah, we actually get to talk to each other.
We do, which is always a plus. Peter, I have to tell you, I'm going to start bringing you up to our house on a regular basis because those kids were the most subdued, behaved, quiet. I mean, who are these children? I need to bring this man to our house. This is what I must do.
I will check with my consultants, my agent, and my social secretary, and somebody from my team will get back to you about this.
It was really fun to hear that whole conversation take place, and I know that they enjoyed it. It was they neither had ever done a radio interview before, so
it's intimidating. And
I'm sure they were a little nervous, but I think they enjoyed the experience with you.
About my sister Helen and I at roughly that age and kind of working off of each other. But I meant what I said. You had sent me one of Elaine's poems some time back, Karyn, and I was taken aback. She's a fine writer with a real sense of using words and obviously an inquiring mind. Michael reminded me a bit more of Richard in terms of kind of his I can't even pin it down, but there was just something in his delivery and observations and view of the world. And
I feel like an idiot when I talk with him. Michael is actually an outstanding artist. It's not really something that easily comes up in a radio interview.
Well, I'd love to.
His work is astonishing. Even as a 4 or 5 year old boy, he was making drawings and sculpture that just blew Karyn and me away. Yeah. And to this day, his drawings, he's really interested in things like Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy literature and Tolkien and things related to this. And his drawings of various knights or dragons and things they're really good. He's getting to the point where he could easily do illustration at a professional level. In my opinion, give him a couple more years and he's there.
How old is he actually right now?
Michael is 12.
He's 12.
Because at that age, that was the thing that I shone at more than anything. I was very precocious. I was already starting to get special oil painting lessons, and it was my first way to establish myself in what we laughingly call the grown-up world that I expected for my work in that area. And
he's the boy is good.
Yeah,
he's got it.
Yeah, it has been. Well, we actually saw each other just a few days ago, ironically, in scenic Jersey City.
We did this last weekend, and I've had a couple of people asking whether we were planning to discuss that conference. There's several people on the chat room who want to hear about it.
Well, we should certainly
absolutely
spend a little time on it. And before that, though, it's been a bit of a while, and we didn't get to do our show last month. Karyn and Rich and I were in New Jersey last weekend. Rich and I speaking at the second conference that goes by the name of the Culture of Contact conference. And
this was, may I just add, this was in Jersey City, right outside New York City, in the Lowe's Theater, which was where Frank Sinatra got his start.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra actually sang there as a very young man and was inspired there, I was told, by watching Bing Crosby sing on that very stage.
That apparently is absolutely factual, but because it is such an important fact in American popular culture, it sometimes, from what I now understand, pushes back the fact that besides being a major movie theater in the silent days and, of course, in the golden age of movie theaters, it was also a major vaudeville theater where everybody from Burns and Allen to Jimmy Durante to all of the big bands and all of the important singers, everybody who was anybody performed there. And it's
a beautiful theater that has recently been restored, and it was a very nice venue. The turnout was a little low, but who knows why. We had, I think, for me, it felt like a regular conference in the sense that anyone who goes there and you get to meet with speakers. What makes a conference is the people you get to talk to.
Yep.
Whether you're an attendee or a speaker, and for myself, I met with, you and I got to chat. Burns of UFO Magazine, UFO Hunters was there. His wife Nancy Burns was there. David Biedny was there, the co-host of the soon now infamous Paracast radio show that's been making a lot of waves, I think. But David was there, who did a talk on photo analysis. He's an Adobe Photoshop expert. Who else was there? I'm trying to think.
Giorgio. I'm forgetting how to pronounce.
Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Yes, exactly. Who is one of the more really lucid voices in ancient visitations, so to say. And
Giorgio is a friend and employee, I guess, or works with Eric von Daniken.
Yes, absolutely. And I know he has a bit in common with us in that he went to school at Cornell here in Ithaca, where I am. And more than most of us, he really travels the world lecturing and investigating some of these marvelous ancient arcane sites. And his publication, which I think is called Ancient Times, and for
Legendary Times.
Legendary Times. For anybody in our listening audience who has an interest in this subject, which at one end is kind of, the populist Eric von Daniken, who set the whole ancient astronaut idea into popular culture in the 60s, running up to the very more scholarly and esoteric work of people like Zecharia Sitchin. Legendary Times is a terrific journal, and they do kind of survey pieces and discuss expeditions that they've taken, but it takes you all around the world and gives you a sense that this is a very respectable area of study. Certainly, if UFOs are real, as we maintain they are, and if some UFOs are representative of advanced technology and beings from elsewhere, then in fact it most likely did not kick in bright and early on one June day in 1947. Most maintain it goes back to time immemorial.
Another person who spoke to that, if we're going to just do this conference, was Farah Yurtsu, Turkish researcher who now lives in New Jersey.
Sure.
Karyn and I and you, I'm sure, have listened to Farah speak many times. She has a new book out, I think, right? New book out?
Yeah, she has a new book, but it's in Turkish.
It's in Turkish.
Oh, okay.
I think she said she wasn't planning on translating it. She's doing another new one in English.
But what she does, I enjoy Farah's presentations. Actually, very much. She deals with a lot of themes dealing like symbolism from ancient times to the present day. She argues that a reptilian presence has existed, or at least seems to exist in the archaeological evidence in ancient Turkey, right on through the present day. I'm always interested in what Farah has to say on this. I think she's very...
And when you say ancient, we're talking ancient. The
5, 6, 7,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that she cites, and
having been lucky enough to visit,
I find it interesting.
When I was younger, it did set up really a sense of wonder for a Westerner who grew up in a place where things that are a couple of hundred years old are considered old. And
that's true.
She always opens my thinking up. A very lovely woman and a terrific contributor to the field.
I'm trying to think of other speakers. There are a few scientists from NASA who spoke.
Yeah.
I caught most of that. They were talking about, I'm trying to think now, because I actually asked them a couple of questions on stage. What were they talking about? I can't remember. Space travel. I remember asking them afterward about secret black technology, and I said, look, everyone knows that there are leaks that come out of NASA that deal with possibly advanced radical technology, that NASA is a front for something more serious going on. And both of these individuals, who were really nice, very intelligent, and well regarded in their field, they didn't want to go there in this conversation, but they didn't blow it off. One was a little more outwardly skeptical than the other. One was, I think, intrigued. But these people, they can't. On the one hand, they said, "Well, NASA's a completely civilian agency," and then when I talked about black programs in NASA, they said, "Oh, well, yes, of course, we have a lot of black military programs." So what is it? Is it civilian or is it military? Right? But this whole issue of advanced technology. One of the things I'm writing in my upcoming book, Volume 2 of UFOs and the National Security State, soon to be out.
Yay!
I'm very excited about it. But dealing with an event that is said to have taken place in 1988, and this was, for years it's been known as the Norton Air Force Base demonstration. It's now, I think, almost certainly took place not at Norton Air Force Base, but at Lockheed facility in Helendale, California. But this was a demonstration in late 1988, right after George Bush Sr. was elected president. Demonstration of 3 apparently functional hovering flying saucers in a huge hangar at the base there. Now, there was a person who was there, who described it in great detail. And then the story got out. Okay, so it's gotten out in a number of forms. it seems to have taken place at the Helendale facility at Lockheed. The point is this. According to everything that this account describes, these objects were hovering they weren't using liquid rocket fuel. Okay, they were apparently using some version of what we would now call zero-point energy. Now, the only problem with this is not the account itself, which is extremely detailed, very scientific, very astute. The problem is in the science, because contemporary scientists that I've spoken to, don't understand how the zero-point energy field can do what these things are supposed to have done. But according to the story, these objects had already been doing space travel. They'd already gone out. So now, just imagine, is this true? If that's true, then what does that say about NASA with explosions and people dying and, using all this liquid rocket fuel and doing what? Going into orbit around Earth? Big deal.
Yeah.
When you've got these other objects, these other craft, known as the Alien Reproduction Vehicles, the ARVs, are these real? Well, here's a bit of evidence that they might be real. There is a very famous video from 1995, leaked to the TV show Hard Copy, showing an object of exactly that shape, flying around, zipping around Nellis Test Site in Nevada. Sure as heck looks like the same thing. So I'm inclined to think that there may be some truth to this. And I brought this up with these two NASA individuals at the conference last weekend. Their attitude was basically what any scientist would say is, well, it sounds like a pretty good story, but I don't understand the science. So, this is the roadblock that people come up with when they're in a field where they have some scientific knowledge and capability. They want to be able to understand how such a thing is possible, and if they can't understand how it's possible, it makes it very difficult for them,
It does, and sort of to reduce to an equation, if it can't be, i.e., if I can't locate this allegation within a matrix that is established or that I understand, it can't be, therefore it isn't. Therefore it must be something else. It's either a fabrication, a hoax, a misinterpretation, all of the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that one of these scientists was talking about, I remember this well now. He said something that I think a few people misinterpreted, and I don't think that I misinterpreted it. He was talking about science and UFOs, and his point, he was making a number of points because he had friends. They both had colleagues, high-level, super high-level colleagues in NASA, one of whom, they're world-famous individual who was brought to a place to see a flying saucer landing in South America and told them this. Wow. They mentioned this at the conference. And then another person who had what they believe were abduction experiences. Okay, now these are NASA individuals, both of whom are top-level people, world-famous in their field, right? So, what these scientists was saying, and I really wish I could remember this gentleman's name, was that UFOs, could be true. The whole thing could be true. He said the problem is that science doesn't know how to deal with it, that it's not it hasn't been a proper scientific problem. And he said the reason is that because science deals with these issues as, you have to have something that's experimentable, that's testable, where you can control the experiment, so to speak. And he says on that basis, the UFO issue hasn't really almost ever come up as a valid scientific issue. So in that sense, right, sorry.
I'm sorry, but there are so many things that exist in the world that we can't control. Okay? Can we make a volcano erupt? Can we control that?
No, but we can observe. We can measure eruptions.
Right.
But we can't make it happen. We can't control it.
Right.
Once again,
but we can control the experiment.
It's fear of the unknown, and fear of, if such a thing is true, then everything I learned going for my PhD is now open for question, and it's
right.
not change.
Well, the point, what I'm saying is not. I don't think he was dismissing UFOs. I think he believed in UFOs. In fact,
find a way to.
But what
it's fine. It's just that most of the scientific community has this idea that you can only use scientific principles if you can't be controlled and reproduced and measured by science.
Right.
Then it doesn't exist.
Then it's not a scientific problem. That's how they would look at it.
Okay, but there are things in the world that can't be approached that way because they don't fit into that structure, and it doesn't mean they don't exist.
I think he agrees with that because I said the exact same thing to him. I said, look, I mean, science is predicated on control over the experiment, but what if you've got people in this equation, they have more control over it than we do? I mean, you're dealing with a non-human intelligence, let's say, that's a little more ahead of us. What if they're in control? And he said exactly. I mean, he wasn't saying that this isn't true. I think his point was that in terms of the scientific analysis, it's a very difficult topic to deal with. Indeed. That's what he's saying. And, I mean, I would accept that. I don't have a real problem with that. I wrote an article years ago on exactly this. I talked about UFO research and the limits of science, I think I titled it. It's on my website, our website. And
I mean, some of that is coming up now again with the whole question of channeling. You've written about remote viewing in the past, and everybody accepted that.
Yeah, exactly. Channeling, remote viewing. Boy, I've gotten into a lot weirder stuff than I would ever have thought.
You're a strange guy, Rich.
Yes, indeed.
I
enjoy being strange. I like getting out on the fringe these days.
Yeah, well, you know what's annoying to me? I get irritated when people then come down on you and say, oh, well, he's not being scientific. Like, you never claimed to be a scientist. You never said you were a scientist. You never
you're
said
a historian.
Well, I want to be scientific. I like to be...
right, but you're a historian.
The other thing is that in all the matters that we're discussing, we are trying to draw a bead on, if not the unknowable, then the genuinely unknown. And it's a tiny problem because we're kind of swinging by ropes here. We're doing our best to put pieces together, to couple respectable accounts or testimony or folks, like you're talking about, whose intentions seem honorable and who certainly are well credentialed, with a mass of information that is mysterious, has been worked over for decades to be confounded by we the people. And so at best, we can still simply draw the best conclusions that we can, but it is still a genuine unknown. And I think part of our commitment is to at least do what we can to reduce the unknown aspects and make it a bit more accessible and understandable to ourselves and by implication to our readers and listeners.
Exactly. Even if we're not using the exact methods that a scientist would like to have, if we don't have all that control, we can still ask intelligent questions and come up with reasonable information about this.
Exactly. I remember years ago when I was working very closely and very regularly with Bud Hopkins, yet one more major attack on the abduction phenomena, and its implications came in from Phil Klass and friends, and in so many words, it was, this can't be. It's sleep paralysis. It's this, that, and the other thing. We know it can't be. Well, how can you know it can't be? Well, because it can't be. And Bud observed with this mechanical, unreasoning, armored defensive thinking that we were the ones who were kind of just sort of feeling our way around in the dark, being open to all possibilities, trying to figure out what was going on, and they were in fact the true believers. They knew that abductions can't be because, well, they can't. Therefore, they're not. Therefore, they are sleep.
So true.
Overactive imaginations. And I think it's very important to remember that sometimes we find ourselves looking through the wrong end of the telescope, and a great deal of humanity, due to cultural problems, religious predispositions, fear of the unknown, and UFOs certainly are in the big three for me. There's sex, death, and UFOs.
Good company.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else is over here. But the implications of those three areas in the West are kept somewhat separate by most of us, which leads me into kind of segueing into an ongoing story, which is Her Majesty's government's continuing declassification of UFO-related documents, which are being posted on the Ministry of Defense website.
Yeah, if I may, you mentioned this in the earlier segment, Peter, and I think, as I understand, the big story that has come out, of course, is the 1957 encounter document released by the MOD. I haven't seen this document, by the way. I need to download it. I'm sure it's available. Is that right?
It is, and I am absolutely in the same boat.
Here's the thing. That pilot was not a British pilot. That was an American.
He was American.
Yeah, and he didn't, I don't think he fired the 24 missile. I think he was about to.
No, that's one of the most exciting aspects. And in fact, as I speak to you, I'm looking at 3 different articles, one from our local paper here in Ithaca, one from one of the New York papers, and BBC coverage. And short of having seen the document yet, I think he may have actually been at RAF Bentwaters or Woodbridge based on the location that they give in southeastern England.
There's a great case that took place just 1 year before over at RAF Lakenheath.
Correct. That was the 56 sighting, which I...
Yeah, exactly. It was an incredible series of events. We have radar evidence on this. We got visuals. It's astonishing. It was covered in the Condon Committee report. It's an incredible case.
In fact, I'll tell you, Larry Warren and I, my co-author on Left at East Gate, had a tremendous break. In the early 90s, we were given what I am convinced, absolutely without question, is a NSA draft of a description of the 1956 Lincoln Heath incident, and it is included in total in your copy in the back of Left at East Gate, in one of the appendices, a full photo reproduction. And
get it off my shelf right now.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal case, and what we're talking about here is on May 20th, 1957, an American Air Force pilot stationed in southeast England, about 70 or 80 miles northeast of London, had his jet scrambled and was ordered to go up and investigate a bogey. And the quote here is, the blip on the radar was burning a hole in the radar with its incredible intensity. He goes up. I know we're on the airs here, so I will repeat this as quoted in the Metro, the New York City newspaper. This is a quote from the pilot. To be quite candid, I almost blanked my pants, the pilot said. He was ordered to fire a full throttle of 24 rockets at the mysterious object. And as he was about to, as if the unknown literally became aware of this impending act, it simply took off at high speed and was gone in a few moments, and that was that. But there is not only no question that this happened, interestingly, is just sort of a side note on the media, human psychology, and the way we deal with these things. The story actually broke in Britain 17 years ago when it was leaked and was carried by a British tabloid called the Daily Star. Well, why wasn't the story taken seriously? There it was, just as I've repeated it. Number one, Her Majesty's government refused to comment on it rather than posting the original documents. And number two, it appeared in a tabloid. And of course, they're all nonsense. Well, many of them are.
I'm convinced that the tabloids took that, Peter, as a way to disable the case.
Well, exactly.
I believe that. And
yep.
So,
in other senses, though, it was a tabloid, the largest one in the world, the News of the World, that, with information supplied by my co-author, broke the whole Rendlesham story wide open in October of 1982.
And again, by the same token, you're absolutely right. A story like that, well placed in the tabloids, can do more damage because most of us see them as scurrilous. The New York Post is a perfect example.
This is a typical tactic. This happened with the Roswell case, incidentally, and not so innocently. Back when Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz co-wrote in 1980 their book the first book on Roswell.
I'm looking at it right now, yeah.
That's right. That book, now that was released in the fall of 1980.
Correct.
In the spring of 1980, 6 months earlier, Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz got publicity for that book, major publicity, in the National Enquirer. Okay, and that's actually what got all this information on them out. Now, the National Enquirer back then was published by a man named Gene Pope. Mm-hmm. Gene Pope was not only from a very prestigious crime family back in the 1950s, but he also had CIA background from the 50s, and this is absolutely quantifiable. In fact, Terry Hansen's excellent book, The Missing Times, deals with this. So the point is this. Moore, who had himself significant connections to the intelligence community, maybe more than he has ever admitted to this day, and then Charles Berlitz, who was a 26-year counterintelligence officer with the Army. He wasn't just a guy from the language family, the Berlitz family.
Yep.
Charles Berlitz was a lieutenant colonel, counterintelligence officer. These two guys get in with Gene Pope. When Gene Pope died years later, the man who gave the eulogy at his funeral was a former Secretary of Defense, Melvin Laird. So you think about the National Enquirer. Why? Gene Pope had friends going right up to the top. He was friends with Richard Nixon also. So the point is that Moore and Berlitz got the Enquirer to publish their book. Now, why? Think about it. If you're doing serious publicity, would you want the National Enquirer to promote your book?
Not in the
Gene Pope's job,
anywhere near our work.
In my opinion, Gene Pope's job, because he intimated this many times in his career. He talked about one hand washing the other. One person said, "How do you have all these friends in Washington?" He said, "One hand washes the other." So what is he doing? Well, what if Gene Pope's job in the 1960s and 70s was to disable the UFO topic? And you do this by promoting UFO stories in the most sensationalist tabloid imaginable, the National Enquirer, right up there with two-headed talking monkey child and, Elvis seen at the latest laundromat.
That's right.
And that's what the National Enquirer was, and so this is all too suspicious. And this, back to the Bentwaters case, the exact same pattern emerged 3 years later, 1983, was when that story broke in the British tabloids.
Yep.
And also, I think because Larry Warren's story was coming out, it was going to come out, there was no way to stop this story. So what did? They basically scooped the world in the tabloids and made it look like a joke.
And within the next month, more than 100 separate articles came out, each one kind of bouncing off of the next one. So they ran from well-meaning but inaccurate to decided hatchet jobs. And, while you were speaking, I took down my copy of the Roswell incident, and it's worth noting that in the liner notes here, Charles Berlitz is described as a renowned linguist, a lecturer, and an underwater explorer. And William L. Moore is a writer, a playwright, and an investigator of the unexplained.
Yeah, but they were much more than this.
Oh, yes.
And Berlitz, only in his obituary, I think Berlitz died in 1994 or something like that. I have a copy of his obituary in the New York Times, and it is in that obituary where it lists very explicitly that he was a 26-year counterintelligence officer, CIC. That's a very, very significant position. But this is something, what you find in the UFO field is these intelligence community connections. They come up again and again and again. And now you could say, well, maybe it's innocent. Maybe it's, people in that field just naturally gravitate to UFOs. Well, we can choose to believe that, I suppose, if we want to believe in that. But what if these guys have a job to do?
One of the documents that was recently posted, and if listeners are not aware, the plan is over the next 4 or 5 years for Her Majesty's government to post somewhere between 7 and 10,000 previously classified documents, making this the largest effort of its kind. And although I'm the first to feel that there probably is not a major smoking gun here, and our friend and colleague Nick Pope has pretty much confirmed that that's his intuition, I salute the British government for at least going to the effort of helping us all to have some better picture of what has been going on behind the lines following our French allies and doing much the same. And a recent document also notes something worthy of repeating here, that the MOD requested that Army and Navy helicopter pilots and people on helicopters officially not take photographs of crop circles as they passed over them because of concerns about undermining the official line that the military did not investigate unexplained phenomena and had no real interest in this subject. Both of
Wait, back up. So you're saying that there are too many military people who have been investigating and interested, and the official line is that they're not supposed to?
That I don't know, because I'm not document just a treatment of it. What it does say is that if you were, flying either as a pilot or as a military passenger in an Army or Navy helicopter in Great Britain, they really did not appreciate your taking photographs of crop circles as you passed it over, even if you had your own compelling personal interest.
Interesting. Well, there's
might
very
draw
strong
a deduction that
over the years in Britain in the 90s of actual, true investigation by the British military in this. I mean, a lot of crop circle hunters or crop circle investigators who have said, the British military were observing us, helicopters flying over, and I don't think that they were just doing this on their own time. I would assume that they were doing this as part of their duty.
Yeah, I think I have no compunction about that as well. But again, for all of us, and I'm sorry to say I don't have the URL at hand, but a very quick web search will establish. If you type in Ministry of Defense, and remember to spell defense in the British manner with a C instead of an S, Ministry of Defense, and then type in UFO, it will take you to a URL that will take you to the MOD's website, and feel free to start downloading them, building your collection, either digitally or in terms of hard copies of this marvelous library of documents that the British government is making available to us all. Again, hats off to them. There's a lesson there for the Americans, and who knows, maybe in the not-too-distant future when this, and I don't mind getting political at the moment, this horrific nightmare of an administration is a memory, we may have an opportunity to have more openness on this subject once other matters are dealt with. At least that's my...
I would hope so.
Knock wood.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
Hey, Peter, speaking of plans for the future, I have to ask whether you've heard anything about the Roswell Festival next summer.
Well, I have indeed, and I've been back and forth with Renee Roach, who, of course, was the director and will continue in that capacity. Renee has been particularly busy. She has been given another job within the city government and is moving her offices over to the Convention and Visitor Center. But have exchanged emails enough for me to know that I should know within the next week or so if I will be returning in the position of consultant and coordinator of next year's festival and conference.
Cool.
If so, I know I have a busy number of months ahead of me. If not, I sure hope that they will consider inviting me back as a speaker. So I'm pretty confident that one way or the other, by the time we get together again for our November show, I should have some real information on this. And am also excited to say that yesterday I spoke with somebody who I'm pleased to know that I had something to do with you spending time with last year, and that is our friend Tim Hills in Portland, Oregon. Tim, the historian,
Yeah, I want to get Tim on the radio show sometime to talk about.
He's a great guest.
He supplied a lot of ghost stories for a book on haunted Portland.
Oh, yes. Oh,
and
yes.
I really wanted to get him on to talk about that.
Tim is a historian who also doubles as a coordinator and organizer for the wonderful McMinnville, Oregon UFO Festival that I discussed in passing with Michael and Elaine. And next year, May 2009, will be their 10th annual one, and I am very pleased to report that it will be doubly historic because as things stand now, and I'll have more information on this for us next month to share, that their two lead speakers will be Linda Moulton Howe and Kathleen Martin.
Oh, wow.
Niece of Eddie Hill, making it not only the first McMinnville festival and conference where they've had a major woman speaker, but the first one where their two major speakers will both be women, and I couldn't be more pleased. And I'm just delighted that they're going to make their 10th anniversary that much more historic, with two such superb contributors who happen to not be guys.
Most people know. Most people in the UFO field know of Linda Moulton Howe, of course. Kathleen Martin is an outstanding public speaker.
Ooh, is she ever?
Really just engaging, smart person who I'm sure will do very well there.
Yeah, I think her background as an educator and in social work have informed her rock-steady ability to communicate the real story about her aunt and uncle in no uncertain terms. And I'm also told, again, should have a confirmation by next month, that joining her on the podium will be her co-author, Stanton Friedman, who, again, a good friend of ours and who I first spoke opposite in 2004 at the McMinnville conference. Again, one of my favorites. And for anybody who is remotely considering a conference in the Northeast next spring, I'd put that one up there close to the top of your list.
Sure. May I mention something about this election thing here? It's not really about the election per se. It's about the global financial meltdown.
Yeah.
Can we do it in 4 minutes?
Yeah, I can do it in 2 minutes.
All right.
My feeling is that the election, I mean, it does matter who you vote for, but in a way it's almost an irrelevancy because what's going to happen is we are moving very, very fast in a very revolutionary global way. I'm just looking at an article right here on Yahoo Finance that talks about people who want to now have a kind of global financial cop, like a finance czar. Wouldn't that be nice? You've got, in other words, an entire movement now to take yet more sovereignty away from you and me and move it into a global system. And there are many smart, powerful people who believe that this is the best thing. But I think many of them are not you and me. We don't necessarily believe this. And we don't trust those individuals who make decisions without consulting ordinary people. And this goes also for the many rumors, and I would not discount them, dealing with U.S., Mexico, and Canada. I firmly believe that there are powerful individuals behind the scenes who want to see some kind of merger with these three countries. They will probably want to see a merger of the currency as well. And I cannot shake the idea that the financial crisis that we are experiencing are related to a plan to do just that. You have people panicking over the dollar, they'll do anything. So in other words, I believe, and I'll go to my grave telling people this, that 9/11 was engineered as a way to create a kind of revolution from above, but that's not the end of the story.
No, it's just
the story continues, right, with globalizing. Because if you need to change the structure of the global system, you've got to create legal revolutions in all these countries to allow it to happen,
and
in the United States and elsewhere.
Any other motivator?
This is what we're dealing with, and I think whether it's Obama or McCain, right now the polls look like Obama, but you never know. Elections can be unpredictable things, as we know. Whoever goes in is going to be steering a very big ship that's going in a certain direction anyway.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I think I am predisposed toward Obama if there is any such thing as a possibility of a bit of more healthy change, even if it seems symbolic. I think Mr. McCain and Governor Palin are more of the same.
Would be less of an absolute embarrassment to the world.
God.
Let's say this. And someone has not called Sarah Palin out in this whole divine mission in Iraq business.
Oh, no. Also,
let's get real here. If you want to call that war a divine mission, you got a lot of explaining to do and explain how God wanted to deceive America on the weapons of mass destruction issue, and how God just ought to be great to lace Iraq with depleted uranium till kingdom come.
I couldn't agree with you more.
That's not a divine mission, I'm sorry.
And I think that next month, when we get together, we will, one way or the other, have a new president-elect and a new vice president-elect, and we will pick up this part of the conversation there because our mandate is to speak from the heart about the things that we're most passionate about and we feel are the most important, ufology being the thing that kind of got us together, but we are on the edge of a precipice here, and thinking out loud, sharing this knowledge and our thoughts with our friends and neighbors is one of the few tools that we still have open to us, and I'm so glad that, Karyn, you have this wonderful show and that I'm privileged to be a regular guest on it, and I guess we're out of time at this point, pretty much.
We actually are. We are out of time right now.
We've just had a missing time experience. Where did those 2 hours go?
I know. We're having way too much fun.
Well, your kids stole an hour of it.
Well, that's true.
Dang kids.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on again.
Most welcome. Really always a pleasure spending time with you guys on the air or in person.
Indeed.
Thanks. And Rich, thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Glad to be here, Karyn.
Okay. And thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been Through the Keyhole, live on the Paranormal Radio Network and on UPRN 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Archives are available at paranormalradionetwork.org, on iTunes, and now also on the Black Vault Radio Network at blackvaultradio.com.
Great.
I'm your host, Karyn Dolan, and I want to thank my guests one more time for joining me, Rich and Peter, and Mike and Elaine. Even though they're not on the line with us right now, they'll hear it. Stay tuned, everyone, for Portal coming up next with Tuesday Miles and Angela Thomas. Thanks again. See you next week.